Good afternoon and welcome to the People's Verdict. This episode of the program is powered by the Alliance for Community Action under the Ask a CDF project, and we have been holding a series of this on this program, and this one is the third one, and looking at Constituency Development Fund CDF. Since the introduction of the Constituency Development Fund in 1995, corruption and mismanagement continue to disturb the funding system, thereby delaying or blocking the intended improvements or in local service in which funding is directed. Despite the persistence of CDF management, the government increased the amount from 1.6 million kwacha to 25.7 million kwacha per constituency and expanded its scope from funding only community projects to include youth and women community empowerment and secondary boarding and skills development bursaries. Well, however, the challenges and the threat posed by the corruption, notwithstanding the government through the Anti-Corruption Commission has conducted several operations to reprimand, in some cases, prosecute individuals and government officials suspected to have been involved in corrupt activities. This program is part of the Ask a CDF project implemented by the Alliance for Community Action. The project is as an overall objective of promoting voices of citizens in management of the awareness of the Constituency Development Fund, and raising enough awareness of the link between corruption and local level development. Ladies and gentlemen, the third week of the Ask at CDF TV series, today's topic is promoting the fight against corruption under the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. And my name is Patrick Soko, and my special guest today is the Director of Corruption Prevention for the Anti-Corruption Commission, Mrs. GLENDA MUNGALABA. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And thank you very much, our viewers.
We are glad that you could find time to be with us in the studio.
Indeed, it's a pleasure, and the topic that we are discussing today is one that is of very high interest for the Anti-Corruption Commission. So I was looking forward to this interaction, and I hope that our listeners there will learn one or two things on what we are doing to fight corruption in CDF.
Interesting. We understand that in this country, we have been talking about matters pertaining to corruption. It has been topical, and the CDF and corruption, these are issues that we have been discussing, especially since the 2022 national budget was released. CDF has been prominent. Now, to get into our discussion today, Mrs. Mungalaba, we want to find out, the Anti-Corruption Commission is commonly known for spearheading the fight against corruption. However, not so many people understand that the services the Commission offers. Please explain the functions of the Commission and the services it offers.
Very important question, Patrick. You know, often when people hear about the Anti-Corruption Commission, they expect to hear about investigations, how many people have we arrested,
yes,
how many people have we convicted. And even when you look at the headlines in the papers on a daily basis, most of what is reported is tilted towards what we do in terms of investigating and convicting offenses of corruption. However, I'm happy that you've given me this opportunity to enlighten the members of the public that the Anti-Corruption Commission is not all about investigations. We have an act which establishes the institution. That's the SEC Act number 3 of 2012. And the act provides 3 mandates. I'll say 3 broad mandates for the Anti-Corruption Commission. Investigations is one of them. It's only one of them. And then we have community education. Community education, this is where we engage with the members of the community. We sensitize them on issues of corruption so that they are aware of what constitutes corruption, what are the effects of corruption on their livelihoods, on the economy. And then we have the Corruption Prevention Department. You introduced me as Director Corruption Prevention. That is the department that I'm in charge of. So in corruption prevention, yes, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. In corruption prevention, we work with institutions mostly, public and private institutions to prevent the occurrence of corruption, so that we root the problem in the bud. And how we do this, we examine systems and processes and different procedures of different functions of institutions, and together with these organizations, it's a partnership. We work with them, identify areas of vulnerability in their processes and procedures, and where we feel that certain procedures are vulnerable to corruption, we make recommendations for changes in methods of work so that they improve and eliminate chances of corruption. Now, this is also provided for in the Act. So it is a legal requirement once we work with an organization and examine their systems and processes, and we examine procedures and make recommendations, those institutions are expected to implement those recommendations so that they improve their work processes, so that by doing so, we prevent corruption. And then we have, of course, the other administrative functions of the institution, which are mainly support systems for the organizations to be able, the organization ACC to be able to execute its functions effectively. So in broad terms, what you can take home from this is that we apply a three-pronged approach to fighting corruption: investigating and prosecuting, education, and prevention.
Interesting. Yeah. So now, your department now, explain to me what your department specifically does, especially that you are the director of corruption prevention.
What the director does?
Yes, and your department and what you supervise, especially when it pertaining to prevention. What area of your focus to ensure that you mitigate this issue? Are you targeting young people? Are you targeting, how do you focus on prevention? Because probably they say train a dog while it is still young, because you can't teach a old dog new tricks. There's such a saying.
Yeah,
but how do you make sure that you catch them young while they are growing up? They are also abreast with matters pertaining to corruption so that we can prevent it better.
That's where our community education department comes in. For them, they sensitize all sectors of the community, all areas, beginning from children, from the very early stages, that is beginning from nursery schools. We have penetrated nursery schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and even tertiary education. We are currently working with the Curriculum Development Center in incorporating anti-corruption topics in the school syllabus, in the school curriculum, so that we indeed, like you have said, we need to nip this problem while it is still very young. So even in small children, we need to start early so that they begin to understand that corruption is a vice, corruption should not be celebrated, corruption is something that we should deject in our society because of the various effects that it has on one as individuals in terms of accessing services that the government provides, and also generally the economy, the effect that it has on the economy. So it's important that every citizen, the youth, children, adults, public officers, private sector are aware of the evils of corruption. So we are actually encroaching every corner of this Zambian society by doing sensitizations, by doing prevention so that we rip it in the bud. I'm sure you've heard that the old adage still holds that prevention is always better than cure.
Exactly.
And that is what we are trying to do as Anti-Corruption Commission.
Interesting. In case you are just joining us, you are watching The People's Verdict, and this episode is brought to you by the Alliance for Community Action under the Ask a CDF project, and in the studio in conversation with the Anti-Corruption Commission Director of Corruption Prevention, and this is Mrs. GLENDA MUNGALABA, and we have just tackled our first question, and I just want to get to my next question to just find out. You understand that corruption is a very widely discussed topic, yet it remains difficult to define it. Now, in simple terms, please explain what corruption is with examples from practical report cases.
Thank you very much. You know, when I listen to you,
saying
I define corruption in simple terms.
Yes.
You cannot define corruption in simple terms. It's a sophisticated offense. Well, as a term, just as an English word, corruption, you can say, I can simply say it means something that is broken. Something corrupt, and it can be applied to objects, it can be applied to even morals.
Yes.
If morals are broken, you can say there's a corruption of morals in our society. It can be applied to practices. Sometimes there are widely held practices that are the norm, but once we deviate from the norm, from the best practices, you can say that the systems are corrupt. But there is a legal definition. In Zambia, corruption, I'm sure in other jurisdictions as well, corruption has been criminalized, meaning that it is an offense if you find yourself participating in corrupt activities. And the law, I mentioned the Anti-Corruption Act, number 3 of 2012, which establishes the ACC and gives us the mandate to do what we do, also has set parameters which define what constitutes corruption. So now, according to the Act, soliciting or asking, accepting or obtaining on one hand, and on the other hand, promising or offering or giving, on the other hand, a gratification by way of a bribe or other personal temptation or inducement. Now, I've used the terms gratification and bribe, and people might have different interpretations of what these terms are. Bribe can be money in cash. Bribe can be a favor. It can be in form of a favor, which is used to induce somebody in order to influence their judgment or how they behave in a position of trust. So we have here a person who has been given a position of trust, and because of a bribe that has been given to them, it influences the way they are going to act in that position. And in most instances, they will deviate from the correct way of doing things, from the procedures, because they have been influenced by this person who has given them a bribe. And gratification can be anything: money, gift, it can be a loan. Sometimes it will come in terms of, I'm just giving you a loan. And because you are in need of that money at the moment, your judgment is affected. And you might make a wrong decision just to appease somebody who promises you something that you really needed at a time. It can even be property. It can be any privilege. Somebody can just take you out for lunch or for dinner. That is gratification. So corruption can be done in so many ways. Like a bribe can be given in many ways. Then there's also the issue, the Act also establishes abuse of one's office as an offense aligned to corruption for your own personal advantage or for the advantage of another person. So corruption simply, if we want to define it legally in a simple way, we can say the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. And if you ask me of forms of corruption, how it can happen, it also comes in very different forms. We have got what we call bureaucratic corruption, or some might want to refer to it as petty corruption. Although it is not so petty, this is corruption that is mostly found among maybe the public officers in these public institutions and the members of the public as they try to pursue public services in their interactions. It can be, I'll give you an example. You want to, it's very common. There are a lot of queues there, and chances that you might succeed are very slim. So if you have money, you will jump the queue. You might want to jump the queue and ensure that your child is, but what is so special between your child and the child of another person who doesn't have the money to bribe the headmaster?
Yes.
So that kind of corruption sometimes is referred to as petty or bureaucratic corruption. And it usually happens when public officers disregard rules and procedures and regulations in order for them to be paid my benefits Then there's also corruption that we hear about. You might go in a public institution, you will not find any paperwork or any signature. It's done at a very grand level, okay? Higher levels of government, and its effects are very far-reaching. Sometimes it may even lead to the erosion of the rule of law. You find where people feel, people who are engaging in corruption seem to be benefiting. They seem to be living better. And so what is the point in us abiding by the rules that are stipulated in the law when others are going scot-free? Because it can also influence the course of justice, where people are not punished appropriately for the offenses that are committed. It may affect economic stability, because sometimes decisions that are made at that level may not be for the benefit of society. They may be for the benefit of a few individual people at the expense of a million other Zambians who are supposed to access public services. And it can even lead to state capture when it is done at a very, very, very high level, where private businesses, sometimes even criminals who influence very high government officials to make certain policies which will benefit them, which will benefit their businesses. You see, it's done at a very high level, so it will affect the economy, but it might be very difficult for you to deal with it when you go to a public institution, because you might not even find any signature. You might not even see a situation of a bribe taking place. These monies cross banks. They go to international offshore accounts, you know. That corruption is also existent in Zambia, and as Anti-Corruption Commission, we are interested in ensuring that we deal with corruption in all its forms, whether it is bureaucratic, petty corruption, whether it is grand corruption, or whatever kind of corruption that is there. Then there are also other offenses within the Act. Let me mention this because it is very important, since we are discussing CDF today, because people might be waiting to see maybe some exchange of money between a ward chairperson or the chairperson of the CDF committee. It might not happen. Sometimes an offense will be committed merely by willfully failing to follow procedures or regulations. In this case, we have got guidelines.
Yes.
So willful failure to follow the guidelines will constitute an offense under the Anti-Corruption Commission Act. Possession of unexplained property. I'm sure if you are a chairperson of a committee, say the Constituency Development Fund Committee.
Yes.
And we all know you, Patrick. We know where you stay. We know that you have a VITS. And then because of the position that you've been given there, within a period of 1 year,
yes,
you are now driving a Pajero, you have built yourself a mansion, you have even changed the places you patronize, the people you meet with. That is also an offense, because if that property cannot be explained, then you are committing an offense under the ACC Act. Then there's conflict of interest, very common, especially in this setting.
Yes.
Conflict of interest is where a person knows that his company is interested in a contract that the local council, for instance, wants to award, and he's the owner of the company. He's the member of the committee that approves these awards. Instead of declaring interest and recusing themselves from that process, they decide to stay on so that they can influence the direction which the committee goes in approving that contract. So failure to disclose interest and participating in a decision-making process where you know that either you yourself have got interest, or your associates, your relatives, your wife, your children. The Act also defines who an associate is. So if any of these people who are associated to you have got any interest in any of the companies that you are considering in that committee, and you do not declare interest, it is an offense under the the Anti-Corruption Act. So you see, there's corruption, and there are also other offenses that are related to corruption that a person can be investigated and arrested for when found wanting.
Interesting. Quite an elaborate response there from you as we were trying to define what corruption is. And corruption is a topical issue in Zambia, and we're just trying to break it down into how it can be part of the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. The CDF is quite a huge project for Zambia, knowing that it will encompass more of developmental projects, empowerment, and other components to ensure that they take development at local level. So we look at the aspect of, we want to find out that we have, on our part, we have heard that people selling CDF application forms are suspected acts of corruption. Has the Commission received reports of corruption in the CDF application process?
I find it very hard to answer that question. If you have heard that people are selling forms and you haven't brought it to the attention of the Commission, then I should be asking you why. Why hasn't that been reported to the Anti-Corruption Commission? Because I can tell you, I don't know whether it is because it's as a result of the efforts that we have put in place, especially this year, in working with local authorities on constituency development funds. We have not received a report on CDF as ACC. That is my speculation. It could also be that maybe in some places people have seen some wrongdoing, but they don't know where to report. But this is the purpose of this program, I believe, and I'm sure we'll be educating members of the public in case they have come across any situation that passes as corruption, they need to report it. As at February this year, we had 7 active cases related to CDF, but those, the date way back as far as, 2016, 2017, 2018. This year, we may have 1 case on CDF, which we are yet to analyze and see what kind of action we can take on it. I can proudly say that we haven't received cases. For me, it is a plus on the Commission's side because we have really taken interest.
But don't you think others would be afraid to say, I want to participate in this project, and if I become a whistleblower, I may be restricted, or people may rise against me and say, this one should not be given any empowerment because he reports us. Don't you think people would also be afraid to report?
That's why we are here, Patrick. That's why we are here to sensitize people. Are
there laws that protect them?
Yes. The Anti-Corruption Act itself protects whistleblowers, and we have the whistleblowers legislation 2010, which provides protection to people who report offenses of corruption. So we can invoke those provisions of the law to provide protection for such people. And in any case, when you report, there are also, and I know we might be talking about this later in the program, but there are a lot of methods that you can use still to report to ACC without disclosing your identity, so that you are not victimized at the end of the day. So there are possible, different possible ways of reporting where you can be protected. First, you can remain anonymous so that people don't know. You can write to the Anti-Corruption Commission. You can call, and I can report this. It's premature now, but we are in the process of considering an anonymous online whistleblower system. We've learned this, of course, in the course of our work. We engage with a lot of stakeholders who are doing this internationally and locally as well. So we want to engage. There's a system that you can use where you log in online. You don't need to enter your particulars in the system. You use a code. And then this information can be accessed by law enforcement officers. So if it is ACC, we also check the system on a regular basis. We find this complaint. We are able to interact. We are able to ask questions to you so that you provide further details without disclosing your identity. So that way it is safe, it is secure, you are protected, you will not be known. And I think that is the way we would want to go.
Interesting.
As a commission, in order to ensure that you are protected.
Interesting. The other aspect is that we've the increased allocation in terms of the Constituency Development Fund from 1.6 million kwacha to 25.7 million kwacha. There's a growing fear of the abuse of the fund. Maybe that the abuse of resources may be widespread. I want to find out what the ACC is doing to ensure that that is prevented, especially when it comes to misappropriation and misapplication or abuse of CDF resources.
Okay, we are doing a lot. We are doing a lot. Because it is so much, I listed some of the activities that we are doing as Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yeah, because I recall we had the program here, and one of the economists actually made a prediction that we have seen CDF in the past have been marred by irregularities. And given that the allocations in terms of amount have been increased, we are going to see a lot of issues emanating from that in terms of misapplication of funds, misappropriation, and embezzlement of resources. So are you already projecting this and ready to prevent this?
Yeah. Let me answer your first question. You asked what the ACC is doing
exactly.
In terms of fighting corruption, especially in the administration of the CDF fund. First of all, we want to partner with the local authorities. Very important. We need to engage with them, because we cannot be working independent from them. It might appear like it's we are spying, we are investigating, but we need to engage so that we put it to them to say this is what can be done to fight corruption, and these are the activities that we want to do. So first, in the first instance, the local authorities, first of all, need to build the capacities. There are guidelines. I'm happy that there are guidelines for administering the constituency development funds. So they need to make sure that every person involved in the management of this fund is aware of all the procedures, all the processes that are involved. So right from the start, from the development of the guidelines, we worked with the local authorities in developing. We had representation from Anti-Corruption Commission, so we made our input there. And then before the implementation could start, there was a countrywide sensitization that was done by the Ministry of Local Government, and we worked with the ministry in sensitizing the users, the committees in the districts. We were able to send officers to as many districts as we can to work with the local authorities to sensitize them. And then from there, we don't stop at sensitizing. Our role as Anti-Corruption Commission now is preventive in nature. Like you have clearly observed, the amount that is involved is quite high. And compared to the previous allocation that districts were using, it's a huge leap. And of course, malpractices are bound to happen.
Yes.
There could be excitement, and some people who don't mean well are just busy positioning themselves to see how they can access that money for their own personal benefit. But ours is to take a very preventive role. We do this according to the mandate. Remember at the beginning of our discussion, we have a mandate event.
Yes.
So even need to be invited to say, can you come? We can into any district, because as we have the power to do so. We can we can go into any meeting and observe what is happening. So what we are doing using the mandate that we have as a commission is we are very interested in monitoring how this money is being utilized. First of all, are the guidelines. First, we look at the constitution of the committees. Are we following the guidelines? where these are constituted, and then the processes there. You mentioned that now the fund has the scope and has increased. It's not only for community projects.
Yes.
There are also grants, there are empowerment funds, that, and in these processes, the selection processes that are involved, and knowing the best practice in selection, we want to make sure that we are there to give guidance. If people, we see maybe the criteria that are being set there are criteria that are targeting certain people, as ACC we are able to guide, to say, no, we need to be as objective as possible in ensuring that we give these grants or these loans to people who are deserving, and not just to benefit family members and friends. So we do that as ACC. So also we have actually developed a proposal on a number of activities that we are going to do. We intend to be doing some snap when implemented. We will randomly. You don't make an appointment if you want to check if the right thing was done. So randomly, we just go and monitor, do some integrity checks to see if what the contractor said they were going to do has actually been done. If goods that were said will be delivered have actually been delivered, and so on. Yes, and then we'll come up with reports, recommendations where we are able to correct things. ACC, we can make recommendations. The things are corrected. So we also, so in the awards of youth and empowerment grants, it's happening. We get invitations, and even on our own accord as Anti-Corruption Commission, we plan to visit different constituencies to see what is going on. In evaluation of bids, there are usually procurement issues, and that's where we have the biggest problem actually in corruption, in the procurement processes. We need to make sure that these committees are guided by the Zambia Public Act in the way they are procured. We also this a lot. This in what you call it, the capitals of each province. We have an office, and then we have 2 district offices, one in Livingstone and one in Chirundu. But the good news
is it adequate? It's
not adequate. The good news is that we are taking some leaps. We've been discussing, we've been having meetings with the appropriate authorities. Recently, we were given 42 new positions, and Treasury Authority has been granted for us to open up stations in 12 new districts.
Interesting.
I think that is something. That is a step ahead. And also in Muchinga, where we haven't had an office, we are going to have a full-fledged office there, conducting all these functions of the Commission: investigations, prevention, and education.
Now that we're still on this aspect, I want to get your perspective. We have seen that you have implemented a system of integrity committees in government institutions. Now, when we look at CDF, what about CDF? Don't you think we need something similar, part of the WDC, so that you can also have eyes there to help you, alert you on possible corruption?
I'm glad you brought that up, Patrick. We do have integrity committees in a number of local authorities, in the councils. Actually, the most, I think the highest number of councils that have integrity committees should be in Southern Province. I don't have the numbers on my fingertips, but most of the councils there have got integrity committees. Then we have the Copper Belt. A number of councils there have got integrity committees. And we have been receiving requests, like almost every week we are training integrity committees in fighting corruption.
Okay.
And some of those institutions that are forming integrity committees are local authorities. And we encourage this, we promote this, because they are our eyes on the ground. Like you've observed, both you and I have seen that it is not adequate for us to only have offices in 12 districts. The ideal situation is for us to be in every district of this country, especially that the Constituency Development Fund has gone to every district. So it is a desire of this ACC that one day we will have an officer in each district, and then it will be easier for us to work. But right now, even without district offices in all the districts, we are able to send officers there. It is costly, but it's the best we can do for now.
Interesting. Well, our dear viewers, you are watching The People's Verdict, and this episode is brought to you by the Alliance for Community Action under the Ask a CDF project. It's a TV series that we have been coming up with here on Community TV, and this is the 3rd edition, and we're discussing issues pertaining to corruption. And in case you want to join the conversation, you can do so on our Facebook page by leaving us a message, and also send a text message on the number that is on your screen, as well as engage us and ask Ms. Mungalaba a question that may be burning, in case you want to find out something regarding what the ACC is doing as regards to the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. Now, going forward, let's also look at, sometimes it is difficult to distinguish between corrupt activities and bad decisions made from honesty, incompetency, or lack of other technical capacity, especially in such areas as procurement. How can the non-vulnerabilities and capacity gaps of key stakeholders such as WDCs and CDF and local councils be addressed, rather?
Okay, thank you, Patrick. There are a lot of issues that need to be addressed in order for the Constituency Development Fund to meet its objectives. Okay, you've mentioned issues of capacity, and I think I mentioned in passing that there's need for us to build the capacity of people who are administering these funds. Okay, so like we've observed, this rise from 1.6 to 25 million is unprecedented. So with this kind of increase, the probability of corruption has also increased. So to address this, I think the ministry has got a lot of work to do. It has got a lot of work to do, and also working together with the Anti-Corruption Commission, we are willing partners. Having guidelines for us from the perspective of corruption prevention is the first step in addressing the problem of corruption, because one, guidelines are meant to ensure that they standardize certain processes, and this eliminates arbitrariness, the overuse of discretion, where people feel that they can make decisions according to the way they've woken up that day, the way that feel. If you have guidelines, you have a guide on how decisions have to be made. So therefore, we need continued sensitization on the use of the guidelines. We need to strictly adhere. The ministry needs to ensure that these guidelines are adhered to strictly in terms of the composition of the committees. We don't want to have people who can influence each other in those committees to make wrong decisions. We need to closely monitor the guidelines and the policies that are being implemented, monitor the projects closely. And most projects have failed at the stage of implementation. There are a number of projects where processes have been followed to the latter, but when it comes to delivery at the end, I'm sure you've heard of cases where they were paid money but they never delivered. Or if you just take a drive around some communities, you see structures which were started but they never got completed because of failure to monitor, to ensure that the people who are contracted to provide the goods and services actually deliver.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, our dear viewers, you are watching The People's Verdict. Just now, we'll take a short break. We'll be back on the other side. You can continue following the program. Stay tuned.
Did you know that Constituency Development Fund is a creation of the law? CDF was established by Article 162 of the Constitution of Zambia. Constituency Development Fund was first introduced in 1995 as a tool to facilitate the delivery of public developmental services like schools, health facilities, police posts, water, and sanitation points directly to the local communities. CDF is a mandate of the law and not a favor from the ruling government. For more information, visit our website on www.acazambia.org/CDF. Remember, CDF is your money. Take an active part on how it is used and managed. This message is brought to you by the Alliance for Community Action.
Welcome back. You are still watching The People's Verdict, our dear viewers. And in conversation, I have with me the Anti-Corruption Commission to help me discuss various issues pertaining to the Constituency Development Fund. My guest is Director of Corruption Prevention for the ACC, and it is Mrs. GLENDA MUNGALABA. And in case you are just joining us, you can continue following as well as by leaving us a message and a question in case you want to do so. Go ahead. Let's also look at this important aspect equally as that have hosted the same platform. It's an issue, and the members of parliament have the power to appoint and nominate CDF committee members. It has been found that some committees or councillors are mistaken for funds benefit the people. Abuse of this affects management of this issue, where MPs or ministers will try to influence them, and others think it is a prison because would also they have interest in to be prioritized.
It's a genuine fear. It's a genuine concern. Except I can say it is true that they have, the minister has the power to appoint members of the community. Also has the power to appoint, I think, the community, the members that come from the constituency, and a few other members on the committee. But well, somebody has to appoint them. So the problem comes in when the nomination is not done in good faith. When it is not done in good faith. Otherwise, we might look and say, who should nominate these people? Still encounter this question to say, should this person be the right one to nominate? Because individuals who have interest and they also have influence, and they can still influence things to their own benefit. So for us, what is important is not so much as who is appointing who, but the person who is appointing should be a person of very high moral standing. It should be a very credible person, a very responsible individual who has the interests of the community. But if some individuals are appointed, it will result in, unfortunately, theft of funds, and like you have mentioned, some of the that people, the MP might want to push his own agenda, but that is not what we expect from the MP. That is why all this talk is necessary. We have to continue talking to the MPs, that people have entrusted you with that position. People have voted you into that position because they have confidence in you. I think you are disappointing the you first, but that guidelines are very because describe who Maybe the MP might have influence on appointing which member of the community. It might be a relative, but still there are the issues of declaration of interest that needs to be adhered to. We don't expect that a committee member should be on the committee simply because he's a minister's relative or he's a minister's friend. Then they cannot make any decisions for any community project. So the weakness that we see in the fact that ministers are able to nominate people, maybe that, of course, they may nominate friends or relatives who have the minister's interests to push different agendas. However, it's important to ensure that there are other people on that committee who are able to provide checks and balances. If you look at the composition of that committee, it's actually very broad and wide. It calls people from different sectors of the community. So those are able to provide checks and balances. And then there's also the Anti-Corruption Commission. We are also part of those committees in essence, even if sometimes we are not able to because maybe we are not able to reach due to limited resources and so on. But we are essentially an invited guest at every CDF committee.
Interesting there.
Yeah.
The uninvited guests.
Yes.
We always storm every meeting.
Yes, we'll
at whatever time.
At whatever time, we'll storm any meeting to ensure that the right things are happening.
Now, currently we understand that we do not have the access to information law, which makes it difficult for people, for the people, or rather members of the general public, to request information regarding CDF. However, there are mechanisms or ways through which citizens can obtain this critical information if they are to play an oversight role effectively. What are some of the mechanisms that citizens can utilize? Are there any mechanisms citizens can utilize to get information despite the absence of the access to information law?
Yeah. Well, hard question there. Indeed, we don't have the access to information law. It has not been enacted in Zambia. But as a commission, in the interest of enhancing transparency and accountability, we think it's a very progressive piece of legislation to have, because it would give members of the public access to the necessary information for them to monitor properly and share information where they need to. However, even if it is a key piece of legislation in enhancing or fostering good governance, where it has been enacted in countries where it is, I think it has been enacted with caution, because it's not every information that should be in the public domain. You know, a country is not a company. It's a nation, and there are security issues, and the government has got these responsibilities to protect the citizens. So some information may be kept from the public for the benefit of the public, but where information is not secret, it's not confidential, we strongly believe members of the public should have access. That is the only way they can monitor. We know there are a number of CSOs that have been doing public expenditure tracking in these local communities, and they are able to see, but they are limited in terms of how much information they can access because of the absence of that act.
Okay.
So there are a lot of things that people can do. One, you can observe, you know, what is happening in your communities. For instance, this money is intended for community development projects, and once the wards receive proposals and these are agreed as these are the community projects, people should be able to monitor how those projects are being implemented. There's a case that we investigated some time back where the MP there, Kolaiko, colluded with the chairperson of the Constituency Development Committee. They paid a contractor for the supply of some GLENDA or something, which was never delivered. Okay? But now these are projects that the community identified. These are our priorities. We need a GLENDA. I don't think those are decisions that are made by individuals. They are community projects. So if it is not happening, the members of the community can question the authorities to say there are these projects that we have submitted which were approved, and we also encourage that there should be, displaying the results of the community projects, for instance, that have been approved for implementation, so that people are aware that this is the project that we expect to see. If it is a bridge, people should know that from this month's CDF we are doing a bridge. Then people will be able to see whether it is being implemented.
What about the aspect of the stages in terms of identifying selection, allocation, and implementation of CDF project? How have you taken an interest in those stages in terms of identifying loopholes?
Yes, that is our whole purpose of being part of these committees. Mm-hmm. Because when we are part of the committee, we say we participate from start to end. So if it's a procurement process, once we are invited, say maybe to evaluate some projects, we request the documents to see the initial stages of that process. How was this need identified? Mm-hmm. Who was involved in the identification of that need? Was there input from the communities? Was how was the contractor engaged? Was there an advert that was publicized, or was there an objective way that this contract was entered into? So we just monitor the whole process. It is not just at evaluation stage. And in our proposal, I talked about our plan. We have done a work plan on how we intend to work with the communities. We also want to monitor the implementation of these projects and inspect together with the local authorities. We are working together with them, so we are not investigating to look for faults. It's not a fault-finding mission, but it's working together to ensure that we are able to give guidance at every stage of the process.
Now, but how would you say corruption in CDF processes affects the lives of ordinary citizens? How does it affect ordinary citizens? In
many ways. First of all, we need to understand what is the objective of this CDF. Mm-hmm. It's one way that government tries to actualize the decentralization policy to ensure that services, decision making is done at the root mm-hmm. level, so that people are able to manage their own affairs. And by that way, the hope is that development will be taken to the grassroots faster because there is participation. Okay. Now, if CDF is mismanaged, already we know what problems are there in the rural areas. Some of them do not have health facilities nearby. They walk a lot of kilometers to access health facilities. Education. There are no schools in some of these localities. Some do not even have clean drinking water. Now here we are talking about money that has been given to this community to improve their livelihoods in all these areas. In some situations, children are not going to school because, one, they can't afford a uniform, because they can't stay hungry the whole day, there's no food, or because they cannot buy the small user fees maybe that the schools might be requesting. Now we are happy the government has introduced free education, but there are books, there are other things that people need to access for. Mm-hmm. So if we can't make this money accessible to the people, it means that we are perpetuating poverty. We are perpetuating poverty, and the unfortunate thing is that this corruption, the effects are felt more by the poor people. It may be done in urban areas, in the offices and all, but because it is denying these local communities the much needed services, they end up being the victims, the bigger victims. So it will affect their lives in so many ways that we can spend the whole day here talking about the effects of corruption.
But earlier you also ably defined corruption. But how can citizens identify corruption in matters relating to the Constituency Development Fund?
Usually you see it in the behavior of the officials, and also you see it in the failure to deliver on the projects that need to be delivered. Where there is corruption, decisions will be made mostly unilaterally. You see where people are deliberately failing to hold committee meetings, finding all sorts of excuses for not sitting as a constituency development committee to approve, but they make decisions unilaterally, so that they make decisions that will benefit themselves and their cronies. Sometimes it will be just issue of information not flowing, missing information. People cannot access the information that they want. This means there's something that people are hiding. Means corruption is taking place. Sometimes you just see it in the change in lifestyles of the people who are involved in approving or administering this fund. Sometimes you see it in incomplete projects. People expect, sometimes they might even start, but because of corruption, you are not able to complete projects. You take longer than the expected period to implement a program. A road can start, you see it also in the substandard infrastructure that would be there. If, for instance, it's an issue of grading roads or clearing roads or whatever, you will see the quality of work where corruption is involved. It would not be up to standard. If it's tarring roads, we've seen cases where a road has been tarred this year. The rain just falls once, you're already seeing potholes. You can already suspect that there must be corruption.
Exactly.
Money which was supposed to go into the project has ended up in somebody's pocket.
As we come towards the end of our discussion, I want you to just tackle these two last questions. People are aware that certain crimes such as theft occur. They can simply walk into a police station and report the suspected offense they have witnessed. How does the process of reporting suspected corruption work? Are there special procedures one needs to follow? And let's also look at broadly, how can citizens participate in the fight against corruption? We wind up with this, these two questions. Yes.
Okay, so reporting corruption is not complicated as one might want to think. I mentioned the offices where we are located in, or the provincial centers, except for Muchinga for now. You can walk in. Just simply walk into the office. It's a very friendly environment. You'll be attended to by professionals. They will hear you, listen to your complaint, take down your complaint. You inform them whether you want to remain anonymous or whether you want to be identified, because maybe you want to provide further information. It's entirely up to you. You can call. We have a toll-free line which we use, which is 5980 from any network, Zamtel, Airtel, MTN, and you'll be attended to. You give your complaint, they'll give you follow-up questions, and you respond as best as you can in order to help the officers have some lead to the complaints that you are making. We also have a WhatsApp line. If you want, you can use WhatsApp. It's 09730395550. You can also send an email. We have an email address, info@acc.gov.zm. And so you can drop your complaint on any of those platforms, or you can also write a letter. I know I don't know who remembers how to write a letter nowadays with all this technology, but if you are old-fashioned like me, you might want to write a letter. We have, you write to the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, PO Box 50486, Chachacha Road, Lusaka. Then your other question was, how can citizens participate in the fight against corruption? This has been our clarion call. We are always calling upon the citizens to work with the Anti-Corruption Commission in fighting corruption, because firstly, the effects of corruption are universal. You might want to sit back and say it is none of my business, but the effects will hit you, whether you like it or not, because it will affect the economy, it will affect the rule of law in the country, it will affect the security of the nation, which you are part and parcel of. So because of this, we insist that you participate, as it is a responsibility of every citizen, each and every person, to get involved in the fight against corruption. And how can you do this? One, first you start with yourself. You have to uphold high levels of integrity at all times. This means that you do the right thing even when no one is watching, even when you are alone. Two, we expect citizens to report when they encounter corruption. You can hear it, you can smell it, you can see it. I've given you some signals in the way people or public officials are behaving, for instance. If you suspect somebody suddenly has changed their lifestyle, report to the ACC, because I've said that is an offense. And then not getting involved in corruption yourself. When you are given a bribe, it is actually a requirement by law that you should report within 24 hours. If somebody offers you a bribe, report within 24 hours. And then with respect to the CDF, we would really encourage members of the public to get a copy of the guidelines. Get hold of the guidelines, study them and understand the provisions of the guidelines, because it will help you monitor what is happening and be able to speak out when you see something wrong.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mungalaba, for finding time to discuss with our dear viewers matters pertaining to corruption and the Constituency Development Fund. And when we call on you next time, we hope you make yourself available as well.
Definitely. I would definitely want to come and speak more, because we shouldn't stop talking about corruption.
Interesting. Thank you. Well, our dear viewers, we have come to the end of the program. Today we have been talking about promoting the fight against corruption and under the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. And my guest has been Mrs. Mungalaba, to help from the Anti-Corruption Commission. She is the Director of Corruption Prevention. This has been Patrick Soko. Until next week when we come with another interesting episode of The People's Verdict, keep it on Kane TV. Stay tuned.